closely with as we continue discussions around DEIA strategy, implementation, and outcomes. The Office of the General Counsel, with whom we'll seek to work as we continue our discussions around data, and OIG and BFA, whom we'll hear from later today. I'm the first to admit this is an ambitious agenda for our committee. It is not meant to be exclusive of other priorities which may come up. I hope setting out a few pillars will set the stage for a very productive 2 years in which we will get a lot done and leave NSF better than we found it. I would now like to open the floor to my colleagues. Have I missed things you would like to include? We have 2 years together, so you don't have to lay down the markers today. But what do you think, my friends?
Well, I'd like to say bravo.
Steve, I'll just add that I think it's great as chair that you laid out, your main pillars. We know where we're going. We know what our priorities are. We start getting our heads around some of these more complex ideas. So thanks for laying this out for us.
Steve, if I could chime in just briefly on one of your points. The legislation that we've all been talking about, CHIPS Plus, includes a direction for an independent study of broader impacts. So we're still looking at that. The president hasn't even signed it yet, but it'll impact one of the pillars, and we'll have to work with NSF leadership to make sure that what we do aligns with what they have been directed to do by Congress.
Yeah. But it sounds from what you just said there briefly that it's supportive of our committee's goals to develop.
Very much. Strongly
That's
aligned.
great. Yeah. Great. So they're coming in with us. That's good.
Just need to coordinate.
Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts? I think, again, we should, I started with 8. They are not meant to limit us, but I think what they do is show the incredible opportunities for us over the next couple of years, and we can make them a work in progress and add and subtract as time goes by. Any last comments? All right, let's move on to data collection, which is a subject that's near and dear to this committee's heart for the past couple of years. Quality data is essential, both for this committee to do its oversight work, as well as for the NSF to tell its success stories and identify areas where we can improve. Your board book contains an internal memo on the kinds of data that NSF awardees that this committee and other parts of the board have recently requested. Last month, the committee requested Office of General Counsel's input to identify the specific constraints on mandatory and voluntary collection of data and the storage and use of such data from every person who benefits directly from NSF support. This includes NSF proposal submitters, PIs, co-PIs, researchers, staff, students, and trainees. In response to our questions, the Office of the General Counsel provided a memo, but due to its advisory nature, we won't go into the particulars today, okay? It is apparent that 3 laws impact demographic data collection. 1, the Paperwork Reduction Act, 2, the Privacy Act, and 3, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. We will continue to discuss their effects on data collection with NSF staff, and we'll hear more about the current data collection next week. Today, I asked the committee members for their input on data that is needed to establish the NSF is delivering benefits from funded research, that NSF funding is going to the full range of researchers and institutions from the United States, and that we are meeting our commitments to DEI and other important initiatives of this board. Are there any questions about data collection? I mean, I was talking to the staff yesterday. Go ahead, John.
I fear I'm going to sound repetitive, but the CHIPS Plus Act also has 2 sections on data collection, including requirements on the director related to demographic data. And that's actually, happy to say, is an interagency thing in which NSF will have a leadership role. So it won't just be, different administrative burdens being created by different federal agencies. But again, hasn't even been signed yet, so we're still, starting to look at that legislation. Put a flag on that too.
That's very helpful, John. And also, I think it emphasizes an area where I would like to continue the work of the committee and the decisions of my predecessor in highlighting and asking for the active involvement of staff in our proceedings, because you folks do not only create tremendously good work, but have an understanding of what's going on. You know the CHIPS Act probably better than anybody on this telecon, John, and volunteering these kinds of things right into the discussion is exactly how I think Anila ran the committee before my time, and how Steve Leith and I want to run it going forward. Is that fair, Steve?
Yes, that's great. I'm 100% on board with that.
So with regard to the data, I was talking to the staff yesterday, and basically I think there are 2 questions. One, are we getting all of the data permitted by law? I mean, trying to take all this complexity down to something. Are we getting the maximum data permitted by law? And then the second question is, are we using that data to its full effect? And just the way I think about it as we go through all these data discussions, those 2 questions are the core questions that appeal to me. What does anybody else think? Okay. Well, last chance.
We'll take that as affirmation.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's
good.
what's permitted by law and there's what we want to accomplish too.
Yes.
So the devil's really in the details, reading through the description of what's allowed by law and how that's going to relate to what we want to achieve.
That's a really good point. It isn't just the bifurcated thing I was suggesting. There's 3 pieces. One, we have to focus on what do we need to achieve, because that may require us to seek data which we currently don't have access to. So that really is a full third of the puzzle. And I'd like that reflected in the minutes.
Could I make a comment?
Please.
I think that that these are important questions. I agree completely with that. But I think that it will be important in the immediate future if the CHIPS bill passes, to examine immediately. Maybe I'm wrong. But certainly to examine at some point how the CHIPS language impinges on the opinion we have just had from General Counsel.
What do you think, John?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question at this point. I'd want to talk to lawyers.
Right.
But that doesn't.
I don't think we're going to go into it today. I think.
No, I don't suggest going into it. I'm thinking that we, in a sense, are on pause, because if that language passes, then we will have to. I think everyone,
Yes.
the agencies, will have to think about how it impinges on the way they have interpreted these the interpretation that we're seeing in front of us, which is undeniable.
So I would say, Anila, that I don't expect anything in this to override the Privacy Act or the acts that Steve referenced. This is,
I don't know.
they supersede.
But I can see that it will, in terms of data collection, people will have to do workarounds or look for workarounds more specific. Maybe. My only point is that I think we have to pause this to some extent on these questions.
Thank you for that.
Stuck.
Anything else on data collection? Okay, that became an interesting discussion. I particularly like your comment, Scott, which will reflect in the minutes, because once we do get over this pause that Anila references, being proactive about what we can do to enhance our data collection is very important. We'll be meeting on the basis of this discussion to identify opportunities with NSF staff, and we will keep you closely posted. Next, our wonderful Inspector General, Allison Lerner, and Assistant Inspector General for Audits, Mark Bell, will update us on the recent work of the Office of the Inspector General, which I refer to as OIG. In particular, they will discuss the Office of Audit's work on the NSF's EPSCOR program, which, as we discussed at the beginning of the meeting, is the subject of an ongoing interest to this committee. People will have the opportunity to comment and ask questions. Also, Mark, I would ask you to take a bow over the recent GAO report, which doesn't appear in my notes for this, but when you get a really great GAO report like that, you might want to say a couple of words about that as well.
Thanks so much, Steve. And I'll let Mark speak to the GAO report, but I want to thank you guys for giving us time today to fill you in on our recent EPSCOR capping report. You know, as we followed the various pieces of legislation that ultimately became the CHIPS and Science Act, it was clear throughout that there was going to be, in all likelihood, growth in the EPSCOR program. And so what we wanted to do is look back over the mini audit reports that we'd written in this area for lessons that could be worthwhile and should be considered as the program grows and expands. So Mark is going to fill you in on that process. And Mark, I'll turn the floor over to you for that now.
Thank you, Allison. And Bruce, if you want to cue the slides. And I thank everybody for the opportunity to talk about our work today. Excuse me, I'm going to speak on the EPSCOR, specifically on the EPSCOR capstone report, and preview some of the other work that we have coming out that you may have an interest in. So to start with, next slide, please, Bruce. To start with, I want to thank NSF for its quick responses to the recommendations, which I will cover later in the brief. Additionally, NSF has proposed new funding program in FY23, Growing Research Access for Nationally Transformative Equity and Diversity, granted, to provide resources to enable institutions to build stronger research administrative infrastructure. We hope our report will help facilitate that request. While our audits focused on NSF's EPSCOR, it's important to remember that there are 4 other federal agencies that have an EPSCOR program. So recipients from beyond NSF, as well as leadership from those agencies, could benefit from our findings. Next, I'm going to talk about the key findings. One of the key things we saw that ran throughout the program was that recipients need stronger oversight and controls. This theme ran through all our work, and we messaged it at every level in our awardee reports. The internal NSF report, the broader EPSCOR capstone report, which impacts the whole community, and each of the awardee reports. Next slide, Bruce. Excuse me. The next, one of the key findings, and this is a finding we see not only in EPSCOR, but we often see in our other grant work. Regarding this finding, NSF has already developed and issued outreach materials on subrecipient risk, including providing a webinar in June addressing subawards and subrecipient monitoring. Over 1,200 participants attended the conference. They've are developing a webpage with tools and resources to assist awardee organizations in meeting compliance requirements related to federal assistance awards, expanding its outreach at NSF EPSCOR annual meetings by including DGA and DIS and presenting topics, including those related to assessing subrecipient risk and oversight, along with many, many other actions. Next slide, please. And another area that we found was there's a general lack of understanding of what are the allowable costs, particularly with subrecipients. So we worked with NSF and they have updated its program solicitation for EPSCOR Track 1 awards. EPSCOR added language emphasizing that the budget must comply with 2 CFR 200 and the PAPPG, and cautions proposing entities to ensure all costs are allowable, especially those costs associated with participants. Next slide. The third area was errors associated with accounting system. This is also a problem with accounting system changes, excuse me. This is also an issue that transcends EPSCOR. BFA has already joined program staff on 6 EPSCOR virtual reverse sites visits. These include a new financial stewardship session for NSF to inquire about accounting system changes. And NSF plans to ultimately have all 28 jurisdictions undergo a financial stewardship session with DGA and DIS by 2024. Next slide. And before I talk about our upcoming work, we actually met with GAO yesterday. They haven't given us a copy of the report yet. Usually they do not give one to us until they've issued it in final. So I don't really have a good update on that, but I'll be happy to provide an update or comment on it once we get a copy of the report. Lastly, some of the work that we have upcoming are divestments of major facilities, which is the last in a series of reports that we have done on the large or major facilities area. We've gone full life cycle at this point with that area. We hope to have that out by late summer. We're moving from major facilities now into mid-scale work, including IUCRCs. So we'll be looking, we'll be doing a similar type of laydown of work from the beginning to the end of a mid-scale facility or mid-scale operation. So that'll be quite a bit of work coming in. It'll be a few years in the making. So. Secondly, you may be aware we've been working on a report on Intergovernmental Personnel Act and vetting of individuals who are in that program. We're trying to determine whether NSF's process for vetting IPAs is sufficient. We've spent a lot of time working with NSF and working through our notice of findings. Allison is actually looking at the draft now. So we hope to have the draft out in the next week or two, and then the final towards late summer as well. Another area we're looking at is the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. You may have seen we issued a report to MIT specifically on that, but we also have a capstone or an overarching report that looks at the program, fully looks at the program. We're hoping to get that out in early fall. That is with Allison's chief of staff right now, so hopefully it will be out soon. And of course, every year we have the FSMA report, which will be coming out also in late fall, about the same time as the financial audit, which both those areas are going really well, and NSF is looking very good at this point. I am happy to answer questions on any of these areas. For the reports that I'm issued, I'm sort of limited to staying with just the what we're doing for work. I can't give out the findings just yet, as the reports have not been issued.
Yep. My apologies on that. Are there any questions? So when we make presentations from Inspector General and whatever, we talk about the dollars and 2.7 million as questions and that sort of thing. What percent of EPSCOR budget is that?
Ooh, I don't know the exact percent of the EPSCOR budget. It's not a huge amount based on the size of the EPSCOR budget.
Right.
But what we found is when we find these kind of findings, when we go to 7 or even 10 institutions, that tends to be a trend across the community. And then when NSF takes steps to address those areas, we find that those findings start to go away. So, which is our goal. Unfortunately, we're not staffed to really look at a full sample of institutions. So we try to extend our work by doing things such as outreach, these capstone reports. And those of you who have seen the Promising Practices report, we use that to engage the community and to spread the word throughout the community, which has been well received. And we have institutions now reaching out to both us and NSF to ask us questions early and often to keep themselves out of trouble.
I think that makes sense. With your plagiarism work and your effort to actually, rather than just catch it, to enable people to avoid it, I felt that was very commendable. Are there questions from the committee for Allison or Mark?
No questions, but I also wanted to commend you for the trying to get involved up front, because the goal ultimately would be to have no findings and put yourself out of a job, because everyone is so trained that they know what's allowable and they're not paying for yoga lessons and going to the zoo. So very good for putting your efforts there to get folks compliant before they get into trouble down the line.
Thank you. And we're hoping to continue to do that. We're evaluating the CHIPS Act right now with the agency to see where the areas are we can look forward thinking, so we can avoid some problems down the road. So.
Okay, hearing I'd like to just take the opportunity. Allison, anything else on your mind about trends we should be looking at or concerns you have?
We are, like everyone, absorbing everything that's in the CHIPS and Science Act right now, certainly with significant upticks to the investment, not just in EPSCOR, but in the SBIR and STTR programs. Those are areas that we've found to be of high risk. So we have a strong outreach program in those areas as well. So we'll be looking to double down on that investment. And as Mark said, to identify any other opportunities where we can, at the front end, try to provide insights that help avoid problems. Because as Dr. Stanley noted, that's our goal. We really are happy when we can go in and look and come out without a lot of problems.
Especially when your team has been instrumental in getting institutions to avoid the problems in the first place.
That's our goal. And Mark and his crew and Megan and her folks and the academic community has been very receptive to our efforts, and we're grateful for that. And we want to build on and double down on that kind of dialogue right now as we face the growth over the next several years.
Great. Anything else from our committee? Mark, Matt, any questions? All right, hearing none. Let's move on to Teresa Grenkovich, who is our CFO, as well as our Performance Improvement Officer. Teresa.
Good afternoon. Yes, thank you, Steve. We appreciate your continued leadership on the Committee on Oversight, now as its chair, and we do look forward to working with you on the pillars outlined. My written CFO update as of July 8th is in the board book, and I'll provide a few highlights and updates to this report. So first, as an update on the American Rescue Plan funding, as of this morning, NSF has processed almost 1,600 awards and obligated over 568 million. There are 24 proposals currently in process worth 15.1 million, and we expect to utilize about all of the 600 million appropriated to NSF. Second, the GAO's review of NSF's MREFC funded projects was issued on July 20th. Overall, the report is a positive reflection of NSF's oversight of major facilities, despite the challenges of the pandemic. No new recommendations were given, and the report highlighted that NSF has implemented 2 of the 3 prior GAO recommendations, including revising policies for developing schedules for major facilities projects and establishing criteria to assess project management expertise of award recipients. NSF took steps to address, but has not fully implemented the last remaining recommendation to identify and address project management competency gaps of NSF's oversight workforce, since this is a long-term activity. And again, as Mark went over, they will be issuing the divestment audit, which involves major facilities. But as of today, and like we're very proud, the last month or so, we have actually closed all OIG recommendations in the major facility area. So it won't last for long, but we are just very proud that we got to this point.
That is terrific. That
Yeah.
really needs to be celebrated. That's a great result.
Yes, yes. So very proud of my staff in my office and across the agency, who just have been committed to really addressing all those findings and recommendations. Just very proud of everyone. And lastly, another update from this week that I'm really proud of. On Tuesday, the Small Business Administration publicly released the fiscal year 2021 Small Business Procurement Scorecard, and NSF received an A+ rating. NSF exceeded its total small business prime contracting goal and the goals for small disadvantaged businesses, women-owned small businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, and historically underutilized business concerns. Our 21 achievement is especially noteworthy due to the added challenges of working remotely during the pandemic. And the achievement demonstrates the NSF commitment to maximizing small business participation and represents the collaborative efforts of our Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization staff, led by Wanzi Gardner in OIRM, the Division of Acquisition and Cooperative Support staff in my office of BFA, all the program directorates, and the vendor community. In 22, we are strengthening our small business program and identifying new contract opportunities to increase equity in procurement. NSF is committed to strive for excellence as we understand and appreciate the importance of small businesses, which supports job creation and our economy. NSF will continue to increase our small business outreach and engagement efforts and maximize prime and subcontracting opportunities for small businesses to deliver innovations that support NSF's mission. So thank you, and I will take any questions.
Yeah, I'd open the floor for questions. I want to say, in the 4 years that I've been here, one of the things that most impresses me is the fact that you never rest on your laurels. It's not enough for you to have 20 years of clean opinions or anything like that. You are constantly looking for things like small business administration and other pieces to enhance your game and the game of your team. And I really admire and appreciate that about you and your team. And I'd also like to do a shout out to OIG, because it takes 2 parties to clean the record between OIG and your operation as CFO. So I'm very comfortable in making a shout out to both of those. Are there questions or comments for Teresa?
And I do appreciate that shout out, Steve. Our staff really work hard in both the NSF side and the OIG side to take these findings and recommendations seriously and make those improvements that we both know improve the mission of the agency. So we feel we have that common understanding in mind. And the OIG and our audit liaison and OD did an amazing presentation recently at a conference about all the benefits that an agency realizes when it works together like we've been able to do. So it's across the board, and we are very, very proud of our relationship, but it takes continual work, and that's something that we're committed to do because we have seen and realized those benefits of doing that. So thank you.
All right. Anything else anyone wants to say? I'm very aware that we have a very ambitious 2 years ahead of us. This is going to be a very busy committee. We've got a lot of exciting opportunities to work with a great team to basically double our organization if the CHIPS numbers are to be appropriated. And I think it's going to be an incredibly exciting period to both make sure we're in good shape with what we have and build for the future. Any last comments from anyone? Otherwise, I'm tempted to call this meeting at 40 minutes and give you opportunity, which will take the time another time. Anything last, Anila, any last comment?
No, I think it's moving along fantastically, Steve. You must be, I find it's been a wonderful meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Vice Chair? Any last comment?
Oh, you're exceeding expectations, finishing ahead of schedule. Good for you.
All right. Well, very good.
Thanks,
thank you.
folks.
Thank you all very much. And this ends this open meeting of the Committee on Oversight of the National Science Board.